presentations that I do around the country, there's one that I give that talks about the 10 ways that I think the arts sector could be stronger than it is. And being aware of good ideas from outside our field is one of the elements of my presentation. I think too often we live in the realm of ideas that exist within the opera field. Even here, our roundtables are with our colleagues from opera, whether it's development or marketing or education. Many of our speakers are experts from within the field. It's important that we hear ideas from outside the field, sometimes from outside the arts itself, but even just from outside opera to hear what other arts sectors are doing. So this morning's session is designed to give you a bunch of ideas. We've collected 6 real marvelous experts, representatives of programs that we find very, very interesting inside the arts, so that you will have a source of stimulation for connections you might make. These ideas can stimulate thinking for your own organization. It may be an idea that you like a lot that you somehow want to replicate, or it may be that the ideas just stimulate your own creative thinking and you come up with an original idea that has been born out of this session. In terms of the format, we will have 6 consecutive presentations. I'll introduce each one. Each speaker has 10 minutes. We have a timer right down here. Brandon is going to hold up signs that keep everyone to time. And then at the end of the session, you'll talk among yourselves at the tables that we've set up with the groups of 4, and you can even make it groups of 8 by combining 2 tables, to talk about the ideas that most struck you. What are some of the takeaway ideas, either specific things that were said by our guest speakers or ideas that you generated in response to the stimulation of their presentations? So this is a real idea-generating session, and we'll look forward to hearing from you at the end of the program about what takeaways you have. I'll remind you again, but the speakers who are presenting today will also be available after this session during the networking break here in the ballroom, so that way if you have questions, want a follow-up conversation, you can do that here during the networking break. So, without further ado, I want to turn to our first presenter, Jay Joly. Jay Joly is the CEO and founder of dimeRocker CineCoup. This is a firm, a program that creates equity in filmmaking. It's a film accelerator model that uses an online social network to connect creators with influencers. It has created a broad database of fans that are engaged in the developmental process. It flips the high-risk, linear patron model of developing a film on its head by bringing the idea to market first. Interesting ideas. We're going to hear from Jay Joly. Please join me in welcoming him. Jay?
Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? It's nice I got you in this nice black box on such a sunny day. Anyway, my name's Jay Joly. I'm the CEO and founder of CineCoup. We're actually a Vancouver-based company. And we are basically, disrupting the way sub-$5 million independent feature films are basically packaged, marketed, and financed. Now, before I jump right in to tell you how we're doing that, first, I think it's important for everybody in the room, since it's a very different subject, to kind of give you the lay of the land. Now, the interesting thing about the film industry, the feature film industry right now, there's really only 2 kinds of movies that make money anymore. The big Hollywood blockbusters and the sub-$5 million independents. Now, the cool thing about these little guys, unlike our friend the Hulk over there, those kind of big tentpole movies, they need what's called that first window, theatrical, to make their money back, or else you get movies like John Carter that Disney underwrites for $75 million on their second weekend. These little independents here, they don't necessarily need that first window to make their money back, or return on investment, ROI. I might say that again. But when they do get that first window theatrical, it's a huge multiplier for all the follow-on windows, which is VOD, Blu-ray, airports, hotels, blah, 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 blah. But what doesn't exist is a really compelling way to do 5 things to basically put them in theaters, because basically this is great for the theater owners, great for the filmmaker, and it's great for fans to give them more diversity out there as well. So when we sat down to do this model, there's 5 things we wanted to do. We wanted to basically find new talent or surface existing talent that hadn't reached a critical mass. We wanted to de-risk new stories, new IP, intellectual property, new franchises. We wanted to build audiences faster and earlier than ever before, even before we started financing. We wanted to reduce discovery costs across the board, not only in terms of how the audience finds these pictures, but a guy like me, I can't read 1,000 scripts to find a winner. That's not efficient, so I need to find a better filtering mechanism. And the last thing is, unlike 80% of what happens between script and screen that can't really be measured in any meaningful form, we wanted to bring big data to independent film and flip that number around, so we're measuring more than 80% of what we're doing to create a playbook. The other thing we wanted to do is bring private money back into film, which is something that investors hate film. Why? Because it's this thing. It's a high-risk waterfall model, which means lots of upfront risk capital with no guarantee of performance at the end. So what we did was we brought a little bit of Palo Alto, a little bit of Northern California to the content making of Southern California with this, an agile model. Now, agile methodology is what makes the Valley so successful. The idea is speed to market with that minimum viable product, that idea prototype that you can put in front of an audience and start getting a reaction right away. And then you start building resources around it as it develops traction. And it's what we call a fail fast, fail hard approach to creativity, where you don't be precious about things, you get over it, you kill your babies, and you move on. So everything we look at is through a completely different lens than traditional linear media. Like, typically in film, this is how independent filmmakers go about it. They write a script, and then they find a producer, and then they find a distributor, and hopefully they get some money, and blah, blah, blah. And the last thing they think about is the audience. Well, in our model, we think of the audience first. And in fact, the audience is our equity. And that's a very important concept. You know, in Hollywood, they used to call it star power, but what does that mean? This can actually be tracked and measured. So we really look at a little film when it starts out like it's a startup company. And how do we build first that friends and family audience equity? Then we go to a seed, which might be the networks, be it direct, indirect, or abstract. And then we build it out on a national scale and keep doing that. The other thing we need to do was actually teach filmmakers to think more like these guys, entrepreneurs. Now, entrepreneurs, it might sound like, oh my God, business and this. No, this is actually, entrepreneurs are visionaries. They're the most creative people in the world because they're very well-rounded. They think about everything they do, not only from a creative standpoint, but from a marketing and a business standpoint, to create sustainability, growth, and hopefully revenue moving forward. So Film Accelerator, where does that concept come from? Well, I'm the graduate of actually 2 tech accelerators. And tech accelerators are really great for entrepreneurs like myself because the concept is super angels, serial entrepreneurs, VCs get together, they put their network and their cash together, and then they find individuals like me who are certifiably crazy with big, hairy ideas, but look like they might be able to execute on it. And what they do is what would have normally taken me 2 years to do on my own, they basically put me in a headlock, and they just fill me in until I get it done in 4 months. And if I manage to do that, they capitalize my company. 5 minutes. The other thing we are very focused on is the social generation, the 18 to 34-year-olds. To give you an example, right now, content in Canada that's made for adults, 80% of it's made for people over 35. There's a huge opportunity here. We call this the millennial bomb. If you guys don't start appealing to these people, you're not going to refill your hopper and there's not going to be an audience soon. So that's a little wake-up call. And what we're doing, we're actually nailing this demographic right now. So we've got 61% of our audience that comes to CineCoup is 18 to 34, and then we got those next is about those high net worth individuals, as you can see. The other thing that's great about the social web is there's no gatekeepers, you don't have to ask permission, and in fact it is a broadcast medium that's as powerful as television, as powerful as radio, and maybe more so, and like it can have its own formats. And CineCoup actually does play out like a format. Some people say, Jay Joly, are you trying to take on Hollywood? Absolutely not, because that's a fool's game. You can't outspend Hollywood. You can't outspend their marketing. You can't do anything like that. So as an independent, if you're going against this other thing, you have to think smarter. But what we realize using big data, we can moneyball them. So basically, when I release a film, because we've built an audience over time very early, if I see in a place like Calgary, we've got a bunch of a really great audience traction, maybe not so much in Edmonton, maybe that's where I deploy the billboards. That's where I put out the radios or the radio spots. And basically turning that $1 million in hardcore P&A or marketing spend but make it feel like $10 million worth of conversion in terms of getting those butts into seats. And we had to have a big call to action. So we're 60 days into our pilot. We're just doing in Canada. The world can watch, but only Canadian filmmakers were allowed to participate. And we actually launched this. We partnered with Cineplex, which is Canada's largest theater chain. It has an 80% market share and had made about $1 billion last year. Side note, they also made about $9 million on Opera at the Met. So new business models. And this is what we ran in Cineplex.
If you had the power to decide who deserves $1 million to make a movie, who would you pick?
So these are all clips from the 90 projects that submitted to our Film Accelerator this year.
Because it gives you, audiences, the power to support the films that you want to watch here in our theaters.
And
the
Michael Kennedy, he's in charge of all the content on all those screens.
Watch trailers, share the
camera,
love, and earn voting power to help your favorite Canadian filmmakers accelerate to Cineplex.
Anyway, so that was what we were doing. So we're putting up $1 million in a guaranteed theatrical to find those next great filmmakers. And the barrier to entry to do this was very low. All you needed was a team of 3, that power trio, that entrepreneurial little company. Originally, we were going to call these guys founders, but we had to give them their titles because it freaked them out too much. So, and the most successful ones in our accelerator right now, and we're just about to announce the top 10, is ones that are writer, director, social media strategists. So embedding that marketing person right up front. The other thing, we need a minimum viable product. The great thing is in film, the trailer has always been that. So that's a great way to get people excited well before you even start shooting the movie. Just shoot a trailer. So we tie together Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Reddit, probably something else I forgot. We scrape all that, and we look at social activity and put sentiment scores, retention, lifetime value around audience, and we start to feel like how people are talking about it, both using structured and unstructured data. Unstructured being what people are saying, structured being, are you male or female? We create a product cycle, so when people came into our intake on December 1st, by March 1st, we know the movie's coming out, so we can build anticipation. We have this great, what's called gamification, so a really sticky experience where basically users are rewarded all the time to tell their friends to go out, and we actually are trying to find those super fans, what are called the whales in the casino. So every week the filmmakers have a mission to do that's based around packaging, marketing, or creative, or all 3. And we actually, every Monday night, we give them a challenge. The following Monday, we actually upload about 180 minutes worth of content, so it feels like a TV show. And every third week, we actually vote and start to narrow down, and that's the filtering process. So right now, we're at the top 10. We're going to announce that next Tuesday. Those 10 we're taking to Cannes to sell all the international rights on. The top 5 we're going to have like this, in front of a room like this. The 5 are going to have to present to a jury. And 1 will be selected to go into basically production. And by September, we'll actually announce the new one of this again. So by the time those first movies drop in March 1st, we'll actually have doubled down on the audience by running 2 of these basically every year, biannually. This is what our dashboard looks like, structured, unstructured. I got a few seconds left. Tons of mentorship. People have come out of the woodwork. They love, love, love this. And like an entrepreneur, oh my God, I'm at the end. We built all this stuff before. And I think that's almost the end. Anyway, there's a bunch of organic metrics and all this stuff, but I love to talk to you at the bar and tell you kind of how we're doing all this stuff. But I should pass the mic here, as they like to say. Thank you very much, everybody.
I'm inventing format as we go here. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. So how does, come on into the light, how does the audience actually engage in giving you feedback about the movie ideas that you have in front of them?
Yeah, so basically we leverage the social web. So if you say something or like something on Facebook, we track that, we look at it, and we aggregate it. So if you guys go to CineCoup.com right now and push Explore Projects, and you can see their project pages, you can actually see all those social feeds together. And we've actually created a disintermediated or getting rid of the middleman platform so creatives can connect directly with their audience in a meaningful way. And it's about finding there's all kinds of different kinds of audience you want to put value on, not just the lurkers who come in and just support their friends, but you actually want to find those super fans. So finding that degree, because those are your megaphone or your evangelists will drive 80% of your potential audience.
So when you have the screenshot that you had of in the movie theaters and you're promoting your website, you are inviting the public to go to your website to review the projects and to like or dislike whatever projects they see.
Yeah, and it's actually way more meaningful because you're encouraged to comment, you're encouraged to share, and the more you do that social activity, it increases the user or the audience's influence score. So it's kind of this, what we call gamification. It adds a lot more value. So they become tastemakers. So when they go to vote, if you're in that top 50 percentile of influencers, you actually get an extra 20 votes. So you're actually more meaningful than someone who only came and dipped their toe in once every couple of weeks.
You capture the contact information, so if a project comes to fruition, you market to those people who've liked it and say, here it is in the movie theaters, go buy a ticket?
Absolutely. But we do it at a lot more granular level. So I know who you are, I know how old you are, I know where you live, I know who your friends are, I know how often you do that. I have a lot more information than just an email address. And that's how we start to build behavior and using machine learning to predict what kind of user you are right when you come in based on where you live. And the great thing is about movie theaters is it's cement in the ground, they don't move. So when we look at our big dashboard, it is like mission control. I actually know where the filmmakers is, where the audience is, and how close they are to that screen to know exactly where to put that movie to lower the barrier to entry.
And the audience members themselves do not invest in the film, but you're able to then go to investors and say, look, this is an audience favorite already. We have evidence that it's going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So we build that audience up so we can provide that slate of 10 is actually going to be cross-collateralized, so it's like slate financing. But instead of an old slate where it's just a bunch of dog-eared scripts and a bunch of big ideas and a hits and misses business, we say, well, we've got a built-in audience, we know where the audience is, and we've actually raised some capital because the top 10 projects will actually get to crowdfund to enrich the potential $1 million budget that we offer the top ones. So it is, and crowdfunding is another way to engage an audience across a social network to get a different kind of audience. And for us to actually measure, is that social army real or is it a ghost army? And how much would those people pay extra to be these kind of micro benefactors to seeing this film get made? So it's a real validation across it, not just with sentiment, but also about, seeing if they'll take a little bit of money out of their pocket before the movie's even made.
Is this a future season planning tool?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Our next speaker will be Scott Gelband. He's the Executive Director of Seattle Music Partners. Seattle Music Partners demonstrates that the arts can extend their impact by identifying and serving broader civic needs. SMP creates access to music lessons by providing a free after-school program for underserved elementary school students. They recruit, train, and support skilled high school, college-age, and community musicians as volunteer music tutors and mentors who lead one-on-one music lessons each week, providing a child with the opportunity to build a foundation of musical skills coupled with the strength of a mentoring relationship. This helps foster self-confidence and an overall engaged learning. So please join me in welcoming Scott Gelband. Scott, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to start actually by asking you a question while we work out the feedback element here. How many of you learned how to play a musical instrument when you were in elementary school? Okay, I love this, right? How many of you also had the opportunity to have private lessons to supplement whatever else you had in school? Okay, and how many of you had the opportunity to be in a family where you guys could rent an instrument or purchase an instrument? Okay, this is wonderful to see. I suppose in a arts community, it's not surprising. But I wanted to gauge that and have you get a sense of the room before I talk, because you've heard what we do. We provide free after-school music instruction to underserved youth, elementary school students in particular. But I wanted to spend this time kind of giving you the background, the context for what the perceived problem, actually the real problem is, and the choices that we made in putting our particular program together. So funding for arts education in Seattle's public schools has been drastically reduced over the past years. Some would say gutted. And from a music perspective, there is no funding for music at all in school, absent side funding, For kindergarten, first, second, or third grade, none. In fourth and fifth grade, there's an opportunity for 1/2 hour a week of group instrumental instruction. But in order to participate, students need to be, it needs to be okay for them to be pulled out of math class if they want to learn violin, or social studies if they want to learn clarinet. And in underperforming schools, you can see that there would be not so subtle pressures from teachers, principals, family members about whether the kids should leave that core academic class to participate to learn how to play an instrument. Okay. Once they get to middle school, there's more funding available, as well as at the high school. But there is an inequality of access that unfortunately follows economic status, class status, and cultural biases as well. Seattle has a site-based management type of program. So if you live in a more affluent neighborhood and parents want to pitch in money through a PTA and buy more music instruction, that's absolutely fine. That money stays in that school. It doesn't get distributed equitably throughout the district. And so you'll have pockets of families, schools, where there is a continuum of music education, kindergarten all the way through 6th grade. And these families are likely the same ones that make it a priority and have the financial wherewithal to be able to fund Billy's clarinet lesson and rent an instrument. So, as I mentioned, there's this opportunity gap, which sadly corresponds to a cultural divide between people who have these rich in-school and out-of-school resources and the people who are left with the default situation of the school district, which is not so much. We recognized that problem and decided that we would create a program that somehow tried to help overcome that, so that all elementary school students, or at least the ones that we had the capacity to reach out to, would be able to develop a certain skill level and confidence level, so that when they get to middle school, they could participate in whatever the array of music classes are that are available. We chose a particular neighborhood called the Central District in Seattle for our program for a number of reasons. A little background. The Central District has a long and storied history in Seattle as being sort of the crossroads for jazz and blues in particular. And if you go back to the mid-1900s, all of the great clubs were in this neighborhood, and it was a stopping point for the traveling musicians to perform. We also chose the Central District because there's the greatest disparity really, of wealth. So you've got lakefront homes, $1 million plus homes, with some elementary schools there, again, where there's extra money. And then you've got schools in neighborhoods where 90% of the families are living at or below the poverty line. Where 50% or more of the families, the kids come from families where they're single parents, guardianships, transitional housing. So so again, a representation of this spectrum. In addition, at the middle school, all of these elementary schools funnel into a single middle school, and at that middle school there are 8 different music classes that you can take every day. Right? 4 levels of orchestra, 4 levels of band, as well as after-school activities. And the high school, it's called Garfield High School, is in its own way famous for its music programs. That's where Jimi Hendrix went to school. That's where Quincy Jones went to school. And it right now is where the award-winning jazz band, they're in New York right now at the Jazz at Lincoln Center, essentially Ellington competition. They're a finalist every year. They're killing it, I'm sure. They come home with the top award, every other year. So it's all there, if only there was something in place to help the kids have the chance to learn the fundamentals and feel like they can participate by the time they come to middle school. So that's the backdrop. And then we had to figure out, okay, so where do we plug in? Are we going to be a program that is more about exposure? That is to say, we'll touch a lot of lives, we'll worry about how many students we're serving, how many schools we're at, or are we going to be a deep engagement model, more like El Sistema, where they work with fewer children, but it's 5 days a week, 2 or 3 hours an afternoon to build a community around music. We kind of ended up in the middle. And the focus for our program is around relationships. We believe that if the students feel like they belong, like they're respected, like someone is interested in them, that they will become engaged, that they will flow into the world of music and music learning. And so ours is a one-on-one model. We currently teach as many as 100 students a week at 4 locations. And in order to do that, in order to uphold that one-on-one model, we recruit broadly in the community for skilled musicians. We ask high school students, college students, and community musicians to volunteer 1 afternoon a week to invest in a relationship with a child and teach them how to play the instrument of their choice. We provide instruments to all the students, music stands, music books, so that they can have the means at home to practice and learn what it means to practice and participate on their own. We go to the schools. We realized that we were dealing with family circumstances where there isn't a dad or a mom who can take the child after school over here to the music center. So we go to the schools. And we provide transportation home for all of the children. We're all about removing the impediments, or as many as we can, so that the kids feel comfortable and as if they belong. So does it work? It only takes about 5 minutes walking down the halls to hear the tutors and the students talking, laughing, to hear over a period of time honks and scritches turning into melodies and duets. I could tell you stories, give you statistics about how many students audition for middle school music and persist. I could tell stories about students who grow up and in high school return to their elementary schools to be tutors. But I'm going to spend these last couple of minutes talking about things that don't work or didn't work and what we decided to do about it. Because we are comfortable with change. We are all about listening to the community, listening to our partners, and figuring out what's working and what's not and what can we do to improve. What we learned was that the tutors and the students were having such a good time playing music together that the tone and the technique advanced well, but the language acquisition, the music theory, was lagging behind. Who wants to learn about key signatures and dynamics and a dotted quarter note relative to a half note when they can just play? So we made the decision last year, and it was an easy decision to make in hindsight, but very hard in the moment. We decided to double instructional time. So now every student in our program receives 2 afternoons of instruction a week. We're continuing the one-on-one model, but we've supplemented that with a second afternoon of instructor-led group instruction. And through music-based games and activities, we work through theory concept, but it's also where we house our orchestra and our bands. So obviously, with twice the instruction and twice the instrument touch time, the kids are learning more and learning faster. But what we didn't anticipate, and what is kind of super cool, is not only are they performing for, extrinsically motivated by their tutors, but now that they're in an ensemble situation, they're also performing for and with their peers. And it's a whole different type of play. I'm out of time. I have other things that I would love to share about the future and where our program might go, but I hope that our story and the choices that we've made spark some thoughts for you about what you might do in terms of your outreach programs, in terms of your own audience building and engagement. I'll be around afterwards, and thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Sure. Can I ask you a couple of questions too?
Absolutely.
Great. So how many students currently are in the program?
As of this morning, it's about 90. At the height of our program during the school year, it usually crests a little bit over 100.
And what is the budget for the program, and how do you raise the money?
The overall budget for the program is $225,000, and we raise it. It's almost a dead lift every year. We have about 250 individual donors as well. There are about 20 foundations. Many of those are smaller foundations. tragically, not enough of them are multi-year grants. So it is, you build the relationship and you make them feel comfortable with donating and maybe donating more, but it is a deadlift every year.
And how long has the program been in existence?
This is our 13th year.
13th year. So you have some students who've gone on to higher education, and you can sort of track how they're doing.
You know, we could, but we haven't done a good job. One of the things is we have a very small staff. There now are 4 of us, 3 plus an AmeriCorps volunteer. If you rewind a few years, it was really the founder and me and I, and we focused so much on building the program and figuring out how to replicate it at other sites and how to increase the depth of experience, both for the kids and for the volunteers, that we really didn't pay good attention to what happens to our graduates, either the students as they grow up or the volunteers, some of whom may have been working with us for 3 or 4 years. So we're now just finding the capacity and the time to try to reform that circle. Yeah.
Any thoughts about extending it to singing?
It's a question that people ask all the time because obviously there are lots of people who sing who would love to volunteer their time, and I don't have a good answer about why we haven't, other than to say, if you picture that we extend our one-on-one lessons at a school into every single classroom in order to replicate a private lesson experience. If we have 30, 35 kids at a particular school, we are in the nurse's office, the copy room, the janitor's closet, and to think that we would invite even more students, create even more of a demand, we would not know where to house that, but it is a logical next step, absolutely.
Well, it sounds like a really great program.
It's wonderful. I hope you enjoyed the slides to give you a sense of the relationships. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Our next presenter is known to many of us. This is the only one of our 6 presenters this morning we've drawn from within the field of opera, asking Matthew Shilvock, the Associate General Director of the San Francisco Opera, to come talk to us about their HD transmissions to the baseball park in San Francisco. It so happens that the baseball park is home to the current World Series champions. We have a limited tolerance for that show of enthusiasm, those of us from New York, so contain it, please. This is a fantastic program that serves the community, creates a really important civic gathering place through opera using electronic media and a very wonderful, thoughtful system about capturing contact information and moving people from the relational to the transactional contact with the opera company. As no secret, we're going to be in San Francisco next year for our annual conference, and we are hoping that the schedule plays out so that one of our nights there can be a night in that unnameable stadium watching one of these transmissions so that we can partake in the spirit and the experience of one of these fantastic transmissions. So without further ado, please welcome Matthew Shilvock.
Good morning. It's great to be with you today. I'd like to start with an image, and I'd like to ask you to think about your reaction when you see this image. For those of you who know San Francisco, you'll know this is the War Memorial Opera House. Maybe you're thinking about the beautiful Beaux-Arts architecture, maybe the sweeping lobbies or the gilded amphitheater. Or maybe if you've worked there, you're thinking about the cramped backstage. Maybe you're thinking about a performance that had particular resonance to you that you saw last year, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. Hopefully you're thinking some good thoughts. Now think about what this image might mean to someone who would never set foot in the building, or for whom opera is a completely alien concept. Maybe they're still thinking about the beautiful architecture, but they're probably thinking it's also a pretty imposing, forbidding place. Maybe a place that's expensive and out of their league, or if they know a little bit about what happens inside, maybe something they can't even understand because it's in a foreign language. This dichotomy of how the public sees a building like this is not unique to San Francisco. It affects many of our companies and many of our cities. And what this conference really is about is how do we blow open the walls of a building like this and take opera out of our comfort zone and put it in the comfort zone of the general public. I'd like to now show you another image. This is 32,000 people enjoying a live simulcast of Aida from the same opera house in September 2010, relayed live to AT&T Park, the baseball stadium in San Francisco and the home of the San Francisco Giants. Here you still have all the trappings of grand opera. You've got a spectacle, you've got a communal shared experience and a shared emotional experience, and you've got larger-than-life images and sound. I'd like to take a little time and talk about how we got to an audience of this size and some of the imperatives for success that we found along the way. Simulcasts were no stranger to David Gockley, the general director of San Francisco Opera. He had begun implementing them in the mid-90s in Houston, and when he got to San Francisco in 2006, he knew that he had to try them in the city as well. However, we had a big problem. There were no union agreements that would even make this possible. In fact, we didn't even have the union agreements to put a photo of an artist on the website, so strained with the media relations. So the first imperative was to lay the logistical foundation. For us, that meant a lot of union negotiations. We worked through that, and we put up the first simulcast in the spring of 2006, Madame Butterfly, not at the ballpark, but at Civic Center on the other side of City Hall, about a block from the Opera House. Almost overnight, this changed the public perception of San Francisco Opera. The next day, the entire front page of the arts section of the San Francisco Chronicle, plus a lot of the internal content, was given over to the simulcast. We also had a phone call the next day from KDFC, the classical radio station in San Francisco, to whom, before the simulcast, there would have been a sense that opera was just completely anathema to the general public. They wouldn't even play an aria on the radio station, let alone a full-length opera. KDFC quickly realized the power of opera in the local community and became one of our most trusted and powerful media partners, to the point where they now actually MC and host the simulcasts at the ballpark. So very quickly, the impact of the simulcast became apparent. But the simulcasts at the Civic Center were expensive. The rental of that big LED screen was very costly, and to turn a venue into an event space that had no event space attributes was also very costly. So in 2007, when we read that the San Francisco Giants were installing a 103-foot wide HD screen at the baseball park in advance of an All-Star game that year, we picked up the phone and suggested this rather wacky idea to them. They could not have been a more positive partner. The San Francisco Giants were really, I think, the first, if not one of the first, companies to really explore how to leverage their stadium outside of sports games and to really maximize the use of it in what we would call dark days. So they quickly got the benefit of this idea, and off we went. So I think the second imperative for us was to find an enthusiastic, non-arts partner that would allow us to reach that comfort zone of the general public. We couldn't do it ourselves. We had to find a partner like the Giants to do it. And quickly, the audience grew and grew and grew. The height was that Aida in 2010 with 32,000 people, but I think our average is around 27,000 a year. You'll maybe ask about that dip in the penultimate point there. That was Turandot, so it wasn't the title, it was weather. And weather is the evil enemy of simulcasts, and occasionally it gets the better of us. So how did we achieve that kind of audience growth over just a few years? A lot of social media, a lot of word of mouth, a lot of sense that this was an important community civic event definitely helped. And that was driven to a huge degree by vigorous marketing. When other companies think about doing simulcasts, there are a number of other great examples out there in the US about simulcast activity. The first question we often get asked is, doesn't this destroy your single ticket sales for that show? Doesn't it cannibalize what you're doing in the Opera House? We have never once found that to be the case. And in fact, in San Francisco, from the start, we went out in a very, very aggressive way with big, bold marketing in very, very visible places. Bus shelters, sides of buses, pole banners, things that really gave a sense not only of the simulcast, but also of the opera's relationship to the community, and also, as a nice tangential benefit, to the title that's happening in the Opera House. So this marketing actually, to a degree, helps drive single ticket sales. And as we'll see a little later, we also then reach out to the attendees, and that also helps with single ticket sale marketing as well. So once we have this audience flowing in, what do we do with them? And this is the fourth and final imperative, and that is know your audience. When we went for the simulcast at the ballpark, we had to start thinking a little differently. It wasn't a public space where people could just fill in around the edges. This was a closed venue where we had to determine in advance the number of ushers, how many levels even of the baseball stadium we were going to open, how many concessions would be open, etc., etc. So we worked out with the Giants a very robust sign-up system, which is not required, but many people now do. And that gave us not only the attendance data, but we quickly realized it also gave us a great data set of who was signing up and then who was attending. And I'd like to spend a little time on some of the results we've seen since 2006. We pull all of this data into Tessitura, we analyze it, we look at who's new, who was already in our system, and what we found over the 6 years is 56,000 new households which are now in our database. That's 56,000 new households who have some proclivity for opera and were before completely off our radar screen. You can't buy a data set like that. That is just gold dust for our company. Because what we can now do is have a conversation with those people. We can encourage them to come to the opera. We can encourage them to come to an event like an open house or to a family event like the recent family show we did over in Berkeley. This is a real way for us to reach out into a very new public. The other big question we often get asked is, what does this mean at the box office? Do these people ever buy tickets? And again, over the course of 6 years, we've been able to pull together some interesting data. Let's go back to that first simulcast at the ballpark in 2007, Samson and Delilah. We see over year in, year out, those new people, so these are people who had never been in our system before, have purchased over $500,000 of tickets at the Opera House. That's over a 200% return on investment from what we put into the simulcast. And over the 6 years, we've now brought in over $1.8 million of ticket sales from those simulcasts. That's a fabulous number, and it's wonderful to be able to share that with you, because I think it speaks volumes not only to our simulcasts, but what we're all doing as companies doing outreach events. Some of them can't be measured as elegantly as this because they aren't in closed venues, but I think it speaks to the power at the box office of what we're all doing in the communities. But for me, I go back to that 56,000 new households. That's where I think the real benefit is for us as a company, because we know within that group there are thousands of new households in San Francisco who no longer see this building as a fortress to which they can never gain access, but rather a place in which events like this happen on a very regular basis. And hopefully within that, we've gone some way to blowing open the walls of the Opera House. Thank you very much.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Matthew. It's just a great presentation. It's such a powerful illustration of your ability to achieve community impact and to create a business plan around it. Mm-hmm. Have you found that any of the households you've discovered through this have actually become contributors to the opera?
We have found that. It's early days yet. I'd say there's a modest and growing data set on that, which I can talk about with you later offline with the questions. But we're definitely seeing the beginnings of that, but it's slow going at the moment.
And then you did an open house in the Opera House mm-hmm. this fall. And I think it was really quite targeted toward the new households from the baseball stadium. How did that go over?
This was an example of where that 56,000 new households really came into play, because we suddenly had 4,000 people coming into the Opera House, many of which for the first time, getting a more granular sense of what we do within inside that building. And that was a beautiful example of how that data set translates into further activity.
So 4,000 people were accepted your invitation to come to the open house.
4,000 came. We don't have the exact data yet, but we know that many of them came out of that simulcast data set.
That's fantastic. Well, we really look forward to seeing it, to the possibility of seeing it next year.
Pray for the MLB schedule.
We'll pray for that, and thank you again so very much. Our next speaker this morning is Sandra Sing. She is the chief librarian at the Vancouver Public Library, where they created a new service model to become the center, with a goal to become the center for access to knowledge exchange based in an ethic of inclusivity. It identified marginalized communities, worked to understand the perceived barriers, and build a new process to make their communities feel more welcome. Its successful teen program, which engages teens to develop and implement their own ideas, has been replicated in other sectors. Its Inspiration Pass is a card that individuals can check out like a book, which gives them free access to cultural offerings including performing arts organizations. So here to chat about this wonderful program, please welcome Sandra Sing. Thank you so much.
Hi there. Thank you. So many people, when they think about public libraries, how do I move this? Is it? It's not moving. Pointed at the computer. There we go. Okay, thank you. Okay, so many people, when they think about public libraries, they think about a very accessible community resource. What we started to realize across the country is that we were doing a really great job of serving the middle class members of our community, but there were many, many members in our community who in fact did not feel welcome in the library, and that there were many barriers to using the library. So what we did is we undertook a 4-year national demonstration project in partnership. Vancouver Public Library was the lead. We took it in partnership with Toronto Public Library, Halifax Public Library, and Regina Public Libraries. And what we were going to do in that 4 years was to explore how we could use community development techniques to connect with socially excluded and marginalized communities, to understand their needs, and to develop more inclusive and responsive services. So in the first year of the project, what we did is we embedded community development librarians in 4 neighborhoods in each of these cities. And what we heard in that first year, we just went out to listen. And it took a while before people actually trusted us to tell us the truth. But after we were in the communities for a while, we started to hear about many very real and very perceived barriers to public library access. So we heard, for example, from one man living with and recovering from a mental illness in Vancouver, who loved the library. He loved the library, thought it was the most important community institution. He carried his library card in his wallet for over 20 years, but he hadn't walked in our doors in over 10 years because he had library fines that he couldn't afford to pay. The library fines were $8. That's what was keeping him from using the public library. We heard from an at-risk youth who was unstably housed, who was couch surfing, and between his friends' houses and apartments, between shelters and between the street. And at one of his previous homes, he had been kicked out rather abruptly, having to leave many of his belongings behind, including his public library books. And so he found himself in a situation where he owed the library a lot of money. So he was scared to come back into the library, even just to access our computers for internet, because he was convinced that when he walked through our security gates, it would alert our staff to the fact that he owed us money and that we would take his skateboard as collateral. And well, you know, it sounds kind of funny, right? But if you think about this young man, his skateboard is probably his most expensive belonging. It's his transportation, and it's a key to his identity. So it was really, really a critical piece of property for him, and he was terrified of losing it. We talked with Aboriginal residents in Regina who would not come into the library because they didn't see staff that looked like them. They didn't see programming that reflected their culture and their interests. They didn't see collections that reflected them, and the space was alien to them, and so they didn't think the library had anything to offer them. We heard from new immigrant women in Toronto in a very densely packed high-rise community that they wouldn't come to the library because their husbands didn't really encourage them to come to the library, but they would come for their children, but not for their own use. And we heard from sex trade workers in Halifax who would not come into the library because they knew that when they came into the library, the patrons and the staff would judge them and condemn them, and that they were too afraid to come in because they didn't want to be made to feel less than anyone else. So, and we heard from refugees who would not walk into the central libraries because walking past a security guard, no matter how friendly and how nice they looked, was too much for them because they had had such negative experiences in their home country with the paramilitary. So lots of different barriers that people faced in libraries. So what we learned in that first year is that we needed to find a new way of working with these community members in order to really respond to their needs and to develop services that were truly inclusive. We needed to let go of our sense of expertise of what they needed. We needed to really let go of our control over our programming, and we needed to work in partnership with them. And we needed to stop just undertaking service analysis with our data sets and with our minds, and we really needed to think about our services and how we approach them with a sense of empathy and a sense of open-mindedness. So what we did is we actually developed a new service model, and we thought about community engagement within the context of the IAPT2 spectrum on community engagement. And so we decided that we were going to work in a different way with these communities. So rather than looking at data, analyzing what's already been done, checking out best practices, seeing what other libraries are doing, what we've done before, and then developing our programs based on that, and then assessing how successful they were based on feedback and number of people that showed up. We were going to blow that up, and we were going to start working in partnership with our communities. And so the community members were going to work with us to assess their needs. They worked with us to determine how they wanted us to serve their needs. They worked with us on program delivery and on the final evaluation. And so while we plan our universal services using a very traditional service model that we've used in the past, when we're working with very targeted groups, we use the community-led service model that we developed. And so, for example, the teens, for our teen services now in Vancouver, this is a picture of our Renfrew branch teen advisory group. We've turned over all of our teen programming to our teens. They decide what they want, they program it themselves, they deliver it themselves, and they evaluate it themselves. And our staff act as facilitators. And the result is that we have a really extraordinarily engaged group of teens that now have a sense of control and ownership in the library, and they love it. As another example, what they did in Halifax, if you think back to my example about the workers in the sex trade in Halifax, what they do now there is they open up the library. They opened up the library one morning before the library opened, brought these women in, offered them coffee and really small things to us, right? Big things for these women. Offered them coffee and tea, gave them a personalized tour of the library, showed them how to use the catalog, how to use the internet, they signed them up for library cards. They introduced them to every single staff member, so they knew when they came back into the library, when the public was in, that they would be welcomed, and they knew people that were there. And it made a huge difference, and it made these women feel part of the community, part of a community that they had never been part of before, and it demystified the library experience for them. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about very briefly is the Vancouver Inspiration Pass. So most people, when they think about libraries, they think about books, right? Books on shelves. When we think about libraries, we think about information exchange, knowledge exchange, cultural exchange. We think about learning, non-formal and informal learning. And we know that non-formal and informal learning doesn't just happen in public libraries. It happens out in the community, in galleries and museums, during performing arts performances. And what we also know is that it's important for social inclusion and belonging, a sense of shared communal experiences. But in Vancouver, it's really, really expensive to live here. Our cost of living is so high that many of our middle-income families, which is around kind of $50,000 a year, are struggling to make ends meet between cost of childcare, between the cost of housing and all the other basic necessities. The thought of even spending $120 to go visit the aquarium, or $200 to buy tickets to the opera, or $125 to go to Science World, it's just too much. They can't afford it. And that's not to speak about our lower income families as well. So we thought, we can do something about this. So we know that across the country, a number of libraries loan passes to galleries and passes to museums. So we brought together a whole bunch of partners in Vancouver and said, this is the problem we have in Vancouver. There are other libraries that have done something like this in partnership with their cultural sector and their recreation sectors. Would you be interested in doing something like this? So our partners at the table said, yeah, we would, but we don't really like the way other folks have done it. We want to create a real experience for Vancouver residents, for these families. So what they did is we decided to do a kind of an omnibus pass. So with your Vancouver Public Library card, you can visit any of the participating venues once in a 2-week period, up to 2 adults, up to 4 kids. It includes our art gallery, our museum, the Museum of Anthropology, pitch and putt golf courses, swimming pools, fitness centers, the aquarium, Science World. And what's wonderful about about this program, I think, and it's a real shout out to Jim and Doug at the Vancouver Opera, is we managed to figure out how to include the performing arts. And so the outcome, so basically we treat it like a book. We loan the pass like a book. You put a hold on in the catalog, you sign it out like a book, and you return it like a book. And basically that's the way it works. And you have it for the 2 weeks. And what it means for people, and the feedback we've gotten back from this pass program has been extraordinary. I had one email from a father of a family of 3 who said his family were high-fiving him because, and I'll just end with this opera piece, because he said, we would never have gone to the opera. We thought it was for the upper crust, and we had a blast. So, thank you. You're welcome. Okay, yeah, sure.
Thanks. Come on in here. Okay. So I really want to explore this performing arts component a little bit more.
Yep.
So how does someone use the pass if they check the pass out for 2 weeks using their library card, and they see that they can go to the Vancouver Opera? How does that work?
So it's so what we did with the performing arts organizations. So we have the Vancouver Opera, the Symphony, the Bach Choir, and the Men's Welsh Choir on this pass program. And we recognize that visiting performing arts performance is a very different kind of experience than just going to an attraction-based venue where it's just basically you're paying to go into a facility. So what we've asked each of the performing arts venues who have been interested in coming on board is decide for each performance how many tickets you're willing to make available to the pass holders. And then it's a first-come, first-served basis. So when the people pick up their pass, so we loan 120 passes every 2 weeks, so that's 720 people having experiences. Then it's a first-come, first-served to get a pass, and the venues can decide, arts organizations decide which performances they want to make available. So we do it that way.
Are all of your passes out at certain times of
Yep,
year?
in fact, we now have a 2-year wait list. So we're trying to figure out what to do about that. But what's been extraordinary, and I think the real heroes of this story are the community organizations, the arts organizations, and the performing arts organizations. The total value, annual value of registration and or admission and ticket value that they have contributed to the people of Vancouver is $4.4 million. And we spent at Vancouver Public Library just to do the past $2,000 to get this going. So it's really amazing what they've come to the table with. They've done an extraordinary thing.
I have no idea whether this program exists in the United States. Do you know of any in the U.S.?
You know, there are a number of libraries in the States that loan the individual passes, but I really do think the Vancouver Inspiration Pass was a unique creation, and I really, again, want to shout out to the community organizers, because they were the ones that said, you know what, let's just put it all together on one pass and give something really remarkable to Vancouver
Well, it's called the
residents.
Inspiration Pass for a really good reason.
Yeah, good.
Thank you so much. Really brilliant. And Jim and Doug, we will set upon you later to hear how it works at your end. That's so interesting. Our next speaker is Sonny Wong, who is the president and CEO of ArtsPoints. And ArtsPoints is something I really want to hear about. It is a national points program, Canada-wide loyalty program where users earn points at retail stores and then redeem points to attend performing arts presentations. So a way to encourage good behavior relative to retailers that are associated with performing arts organizations, earning points and then converting those points for performing arts activities. I'm really curious about this. I'll have lots of questions. Let's welcome Sonny Wong. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. It's a real pleasure to be here amongst all you arts people. I'm just a marketer, so I'm a little intimidated, and that's really how I see ArtsPoints Rewards. I'm a marketer, but I'm passionate about the arts. And I think we've come up with a unique proposition that really can be quite transformative on the arts in terms of audience development, marketing, and I think most importantly, revenues as well. So quite simply, ArtsPoints is a loyalty program that supports the arts. Now, before I take this much further, I just want to raise of hands. How many of you belong to a loyalty program? Yeah, many of you do. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about what we're doing is how easy and accessible it is. People know exactly how it works. And that's exactly how this program works. You sign up for a card, use it at participating merchants when you shop, earn points, redeem it for the empty seats of the arts. It's that simple. But the simplicity of it is belies the fact that the innovation is how it's applied to the arts in Canada, or North America for that matter. I'm often asked, how did the idea for ArtsPoints come about to a marketing guy? Well, believe it or not, the idea for ArtsPoints has been around for about a dozen years. We've only been able to act on it in the last year and a half because there came a point in time when we said, you know, we need to blank or get off the pot and make this thing happen, or else just let it go on forever and not do anything about it. 12 years ago, I was organizing the largest internet conference in Western Canada when the internet bubble was going really strong. And a woman who's now on our advisory board, Nini Barrett, came up to me and said, this is such a great conference, but I have a challenge for you. How do you combine technology and the arts? And I just went, wow, that's a brain cramp if anything, because technology, the arts, seemingly at the time, two very disparate things. And it occurred to me that perhaps technology is not going to play a role in the arts until the arts can solve two things. One, money. The arts are always looking for money. Not that they're not good at doing what they do, they're very good at what they do, but perhaps the financial piece comes a little bit later. And we know in recent years there's been declining participation from foundations and governments and corporations. So money is always a really important issue that the arts are grappling with. Second thing, audience development. We know in the work that we do with our arts partners that some of them have empty houses as high as 50%. And of course, we know that opera is doing quite well in comparison, but some organizations have quite a few empty seats available. So we said, you know, until the arts can solve those two problems, perhaps technology can't quite play a role right now. And I just let that noodle around in the back of my head and realized that, well, what do the arts have that we can turn into revenue? And it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks one day when we said, oh my God, the arts have empty seats. So what if we took those empty seats and aggregated the arts in Canada into a program called a loyalty program and do something exactly the way the airlines did in the 70s and 80s when they were flying around with half-empty planes. So instead of going to one organization, we went to as many as we can, starting in Vancouver and going right across the country. And basically what we said was, hey, give us your empty seats, because this is the program that can be absolutely meaningful to you in driving audiences and actually in driving revenue back to you as well. So those of you who belong to loyalty programs know how they work. You may not know how it works in the background. I'm going to tell you about that in a second. So at the core, what ArtsPoints is, it's an audience development program that fills empty seats, attracts new audiences, and drives incremental revenue as well. So this is not a program that the arts participate in and where your empty seats are provided for free. They're provided at a rate that you deem appropriate at any one point in time. ArtsPoints Rewards is a social enterprise. That's how we feel about ourselves. It is a private corporation, but we feel we're here to support the arts, and therefore our mandate is social enterprise. Interestingly, as part of that social enterprise, fully a third of our revenues will go to the arts at any one point in time. So it's a model that we feel is transformative, it's innovative, but it takes tried and true methods from marketing to create something that perhaps the arts up onto their own are not able to achieve. At the core of what we do is very simple, because we do one thing. Is that 10 minutes left? Good. We deal in points. So when you think about what a point is, it's something that's transparent, it's something that is easily manufactured, but it's something that's really quite motivating to people as well if you do collect points. Look at the airlines, for example. Their greatest customers have lots of points. They use those points, and it becomes something that they build on in terms of audience development and audience base as well. So let's look at some very simple stats right now. 63% of customers are more likely to continue doing business with a company where they can earn points. 78% shop strategically. In other words, they will go to locations where they where they can earn points versus locations where they cannot earn points. And the last one is actually the most shocking to me. More than a third of people will actually inconvenience themselves, drive past a store that's closer to them to a location where they can earn points. There are lots of examples of how points can drive behavior, and these are just 3 examples of that. A recent one that I can tell you about was a federal government health agency normally collects research, statistics over a period of time, and in order to do that, they send out surveys. It usually takes them about a year to generate 300,000 surveys. Last year, they did something unique. They said to their participants, hey, if you sign up, if you complete the survey in the next 30 days, we're going to give you, are you ready for this? 20 Air Miles points. Air Miles is another program in Canada. They were able to fully subscribe their survey requirements in 1/3 of the time that it would normally take them, just by offering 20 airline points. Very inexpensive, but you can see the efficiency that actually creates as well. A program like ours really needs 3 constituent bases to be successful. Arts, merchants, and members. The arts in this case are our redemption partners. I mentioned earlier this whole aspect about empty seats. Well, that's what we've asked our arts partners for. They're empty seats. So these are the redemption opportunities that are provided to us. Merchants are corporations, retailers, for example, who are willing to offer points when you shop with them. So why would a merchant do that? Well, it's because they want this third entity. They want the members that we have. Who goes to the arts? They're educated, affluent, and sophisticated customers. So in one program, they're able to reach the most premium demographic probably in North America. And I would think any merchant would be interested in that. So the way this works, as a card holder, you know exactly how this works. Behind the scenes is what makes it really interesting, because when a member shops with a merchant, well, guess what? The merchant actually pays for the points that you receive. So if you went to Home Depot, for example, and you spent $100 with them and you received 100 points, Home Depot actually pays into ArtsPoints Rewards the currency value of the points that you received. And that's what pays for your empty seats when the member comes time to redeem their points for an empty seat, for any number of the participating arts organizations that are part of our program. So therein lies an operating model that simply through its operations provides a pool of funds that can be used to drive revenue for the arts, and simultaneously, when those points are redeemed, they actually come to your venue. So encouraging the new audiences to be part of the program. And for those that are already in the arts, well, it's a reward for them. It says that, because you participate in the arts, you have the opportunity to actually earn more rewards and perhaps use it to go to the symphony if you're already an opera goer. We started the program, the idea was 12 years ago. We actually only started about a year and a half ago. We have not launched to the public yet, so we're developing our network right now. I'm happy to say that in a fairly short period of time, we've attracted 140 arts groups from across Canada who are participants in our program, including some wonderful operas, the Vancouver Opera, Pacific Opera Victoria, Edmonton Opera, and if there are any other Canadian operas, you can come talk to me after. We believe that in Canada, we should be able to generate about in excess of 3 million members. And that is because when we compare it to other organizations and other loyalty programs, that is a number that is very accessible. The most successful loyalty program in Canada has 11 million members. So 3 million is very easy to obtain. So our current priority right now is developing strategic partners, developing merchants, and corporate sponsors as well. But we also said, corporations are difficult. They're all circling the wagon. They love what we're doing. A couple of them have jumped in, but we actually need more. So we said, let's do something that's unique. Let's look at developing the entire arts organization base that we have, the 140 arts organization, and let's have them act as merchants. So we've partnered with the Alliance for Arts and Culture in Vancouver, a service organization, and we're developing a program that we call the Arts Market Development Program, where the arts organizations can participate and give out points. And what that means is if somebody goes to the opera, buys 2 tickets, pays $200, they will also earn 200 points. So we're putting that together right now, which presents a tremendous opportunity because it allows us to move very quickly. But it's a really great news story attached to that as well, because it means that the arts are helping the arts. You've often heard stories people say, well, you know what? The arts should only survive if they're able to pay for themselves. Well, this is a great example of the arts supporting themselves, and we believe that that will be compelling in the marketplace. What we're doing really is also creating a national community of arts goers. When people join our program, they will all develop a profile, so we'll know whether they're opera lovers or symphony or dance and what have you. So we can use specific segmentation techniques to target these individuals, and they're all pulled together through a national program. But the relevance of it is very local as well, because we all live in our local communities. So local application, but if you're traveling to another city where ArtsPoints where organizations are part of the ArtsPoints program, then you could go to those organizations and redeem your seats and or earn points as well. Attracting new audiences is really important because young people are very accustomed to how these programs work, so therein lies the piece for younger audiences, but really allows us to develop new audiences too, because if you look at, I sort of see audience development as a pipeline. You got a really big bulge right now, but who's coming into the pipeline? Well, ArtsPoints is a program that allows a really accessible way for people to experience the arts in a way that they may not have experienced before. So as a national marketing platform for the arts, it's really quite compelling because even with 140 partners that we have right now, we probably have the best database of arts product in Canada. Well, what does that mean? It means that people are coming to our site, learning what they can redeem for, but allows us to do other things as well, develop media opportunities, develop an entire media platform, and to become a hub for the arts in Canada to learn about what's going on, for us to aggregate content from media sources, for us to even develop our own journalistic ability to write previews of organizations, art performances that are going on, to really begin to populate the consciousness of the arts in the Canadian population as well. I think fundamentally, it's filling your empty seats and paying you for it. Because what happens in terms of paying you for it is you get to set the price that you want for your seats. So let's say you want $20 for your seat. Well, that means in our parlance, about 2,000 points that need to be redeemed to get that seat. So it's attracting those kinds of audiences, and I think, of course, paying you for it. So if you find that you have a lot of demand on the seats, you can actually increase the price. If you're getting less demand for it, you can actually decrease the price. But it's not expressed in dollars. So there's no sense that you're papering the house. It's expressed in points. And people, if they're redeeming 2,000 points, well, notionally, they spent $2,000 to get those 2,000 points. So it really creates value for the arts that you haven't seen before. Data analytics. If you are on social media, on Facebook, for example, you see a little column on the right, and typically, surprisingly, it's populated with ads of companies and services that you're interested in. Well, that's the same idea here. Data is probably the most powerful thing that we will offer to our arts stakeholders because it allows the ability to inform management decisions, marketing decisions, and even artistic decisions through the data that we glean from card member usage. And oftentimes what we'll find is that it'll surprise you what you learn from the data that's available through our program as well. So finally, it's a program that allows sustainability of the arts in a way that we haven't seen before. You know, you may have heard a lot about sustainability these days, economic, social, and environmental. We're the social piece. So that's our presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
A couple of questions?
Sure.
Thank you. So have you begun to recruit members yet into the program?
We have not begun to recruit members, but over 2,000 people have found our website and have signed up as members for a card already.
Does it cost anything to become a member?
There's no cost for individuals to become a member. For the arts to become redemption partners, there's no cost either.
So the only cost is borne by the business partner who is paying something for being in the program.
That's correct.
Great. Well, we look forward to seeing how it unfolds. It has prompted a lot of thinking on our part, and I wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you.
for it. Thanks so much. Our last speaker this morning is Ann-Lee Cooke, who is an innovation consultant. She doesn't have a specific program to speak about, but is going to talk about the way organizations can bring a greater innovative capacity, an ability to think of ideas, to generate ideas and act on them, put them into action. So you've had a lot of ideas. Maybe there are a few that have really struck you. We're going to ask you in a couple of minutes about that. But we're going to hear now about how you might bring ideas and the excitement and energy of ideas into your organization. Please. Welcome. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, guys. Again, my name is Ann-Lee Cooke, and Opera America brought me in today to really wrap up this morning's session and take these beautiful examples and give us a way to think about innovation and make it tangible, doable, and practical so that you have work to take home to. Now, innovation can take years to master, but we're going to do it here in a 10-minute crash course. So are you ready for this? Great. First off, let's get a common understanding of what innovation is. Innovation isn't just a fancy buzzword so that we can sound hip and modern. Innovation is actually a change that will increase customer value. And by a change, I mean that we can either start a new solution, a game changer, or we can stop worn out solutions that no longer serve our customer. And by customer, I don't just mean our ticket buyers, but I also mean our donors, our board members, our staff, our educators, and everyone who is involved in our day-to-day decision making. So by starting new solutions or stopping old ones, we meet our customer demands, and as a byproduct of this innovation, we stay relevant, effective, educational, and most importantly, alive. So we've heard some great examples of innovation this morning, and to really get a full scope of what innovation can look like, Professor Jeff DeGraff at the University of Michigan created this competing values framework. In this framework, we use colors to really codify the genome or the fundamental characteristics of innovation. So we've got green to create, blue to compete, yellow to collaborate, and red to control. We can use this framework on a very macro level, meaning to talk about industries, or on a super micro level to indicate your individual role on a project. So as we're talking through these four colors, start to think about which ones you gravitate towards and which ones are the strength area for your organizations. First up, we have the greens. Greens are creative. They do things first. Think about Steve Jobs as he's carving that first iPod prototype out of a bar of ivory soap. Okay? These are the scrappy experimenters, the entrepreneurs, and the visionaries. When we think about a green company, I think of Zynga. Have you guys heard of them? They're a gaming company that does things a totally different way. So instead of doing the traditional games, they don't do slick, techie games for pimply teenage boys. Instead, they dumb down their games, put them on Facebook, and market to middle-aged women. So, welcome to Farmville. Add some cute animals, keep playing for 10 cents, and buy a tractor for 20 cents. They've tapped into an entirely different customer base and really innovated on their revenue model. So this is what greens do. They bulk the traditional way, and then they go towards an entirely new game-changing solution. Next we have the blues. Blues are competitive. They do things fast. Just think about Donald Trump and his apprentices knocking down barriers and sprinting to that finish line, all right? These guys will do whatever it takes to win. If we think about a blue innovator, think about GE. They're a portfolio business that really invests whenever they can't build something, they buy it. So they'll invest in tiny startup wind energy companies, or they'll spend billions to acquire a chunk of NBC. Whatever it takes to get this big portfolio of diverse companies, and then they keep acquiring those winners and kick out their losers. This is what a blue innovator does. They do things fast and they compete. Next we have yellows. The yellows. They're so collaborative and they do things together. Think about Oprah and how she invites us all to join into her audience and into her book club. Yellows are our community builders, our educators, and our counselors. When we think about a yellow innovator, think of Gore. They fly a little under the radar, but you might know of Gore-Tex. So they have this one essential polymer, and every year Gore's leadership team gets together for their company retreat. And they brainstorm new wacky ideas in their barn, and they think of ways that they can apply this polymer to new solutions. Okay, well, we've slicked our raincoats. Why not pots and pans? We've coated guitar strings, so why not cable cars and dental floss? So they make these self-organized teams with no bosses. They collaborate, and then they make magic happen. This is the yellow way, the collaborative way. Next up, we have the reds. This is our final quadrant. Reds are precise. They are organized, controlled, and they do things right. When we think about a red leader, think of Warren Buffett and how he very methodically and rationally runs his empire. When we think about where reds play, think about your analysts, accountants, engineers, and scientists. These are our red innovators. And on a company level, it's McDonald's. All right, so they are geniuses in process innovation. Go to any Mickey D's worldwide, and you'll get the same level of food quality, cleanliness, and speed. Now, you laugh at that here in North America, but when you're in a foreign country and you need a quick bite and a potty break, Mickey D's it is, right? So they are such great process people that they have even planned in variation. When you go to India, get the McCurry pan. In Japan, get the ebi fileo. And in France, you get the croque McDo. So these guys, the red innovators, are in it for predictability and sustainability. They're the ones who make your legacies happen. So we've covered the competing values framework. Have you started to think about what your dominant color or colors might be for yourselves and for your individuals? I just want to remind you that all corporations compete, but they're not all blues. And all arts organizations create, but you're not all greens. In fact, my work with the Innovatrium has shown that arts organizations typically straddle this line between yellow collaborate and red control. That means that green and blue just might be in your blind spot. But of course, every organization is very unique based on your individuals and your operating history. So just think about what your strength areas and your blind spots might be. So we've covered this colorful framework. Let's go ahead and see how you can play it out in your day-to-day operations, right? How is innovation going to stick in your organization? So it's going to be 3 steps altogether. Step 1, we're going to gather and brainstorm. And by gather, I don't mean that we just get all of our stakeholders and customers in a room and sing Kumbaya and play nicey nice. No, that's not going to work to change the game. We don't want the status quo, or else we're not needing innovation. We want all of our diversity of donors, customers, students, educators, staff members, all together to really butt heads. We're going to want every color represented so that the greens pull on those blues. And your community builders and your competitive guys are really knocking heads, because that healthy tension is where innovation happens. All right? When we are doing our brainstorm session, get together a well-defined innovation challenge. Break it up into problem areas, and then get as many ideas on that board as possible. Impossible or possible ideas, just get them on there. And they could be to start new solutions or to stop the old ones. The second step, we're going to get crazy and experiment. So take your top 3 to 5 ideas from the brainstorming session, and we're going to turn those into small-scale experiments, all right? So we want to take these experiments and run them simultaneously. This is taking your multiple shots on goal. We try different approaches at the same problem to see which ones are your winners and losers. The winners are going to be the high feasibility and high impact experiments. And the losers, well, you're going to accelerate their failure, and don't be afraid to kill them off. So when we find these experiments, when we build these experiments, make sure that they are low budget, a short time frame, and have set impact goals. That way you're going to know which ones are actual and which ones are the losers. In step 3, this is when we are really looking for innovation adoption. We've only first covered this first tier of green innovation, right? So this is your experimentation when you're going to need your green leaders, those inventors, to come into play. In your next stage, we're going to run your experiments again. We're going to iterate, and this is your blue stage. You want your blue leaders or your hurdlers to come in and knock down some barriers and pull in more resources. So as you run your experiment, you see more impact. The next time that you run it, this is not an experiment anymore. This is when you take it into a pilot program. And your yellow leaders are going to come in and really nurture your customers, your stakeholders, your donors, and get them involved in the process so that we can really gain acceptance in this innovation. And in your last phase, the red phase, this is where you need your architects to come into play. Finally, we are building a program out of your innovations so that we can create a sustainable innovation in your organization. And of course, this cycle is cyclical. So once you get to red, to avoid stagnating, think about where you can put your greens again. Maybe it's going to be going from audience development strategies to operational processes. Innovation can be applied in all different places in your organization. So now we have covered the competing values framework, and we've gone through the 3 steps of innovating. So now you're all experts in innovation, and I expect great things from you. So let's go innovate. Thanks for your time.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we can put the lights up in the room some, that would be great. I'd appreciate it. The next 15 minutes, that's all the time we have together, I want to split it in half and to take 7.5 minutes of it to invite you in your area, in the seating area. You can turn around, put 2 rows together, talk about what idea most struck you in the course of this wonderful set of presentations. Whether it was something from the library, whether it was something from the Seattle Music Program, the Points program that Sonny told us about. What idea struck you, and what do you think you might want to do with that within your own opera company? So the idea and the resonance. Just chat with one another about it for a few minutes. I'd be curious to hear. Then I'm going to ask you to share them with us.